Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show. We go to the phones, and joining us, a man who's on the ground in New Hampshire, our good friend Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report. Scott, good morning. How are you in cold New Hampshire?
I was going to say, I'm cold in New Hampshire. That's how I'm doing. And the people who are block walking today are cold. I just talked to somebody who is an organizer for Elizabeth Warren here, who interestingly told me that a lot of the folks that she's talking to are still undecided, which you might think, how can that be with it's election day now? But it bears out. I mean, when I was going to different events yesterday, I went to see Andrew Yang. I saw Pete Buttigieg. I saw Joe Biden. And interesting, you would think most of those folks would be kind of locked in. Like they're there because they support that person, right? And for the most part, that was true, but I did talk to some folks in the crowd who would tell me that, hey, I'm here to check this candidate out. I haven't quite made up my mind just yet. And so that's going on. The former state rep, who's a good friend of mine, Arnie Arneson, from this area, and she ran for governor years ago, was telling me that, you know, the technology here, we worry about, you know, hacks of different things back in Texas, and their technology is a pencil here, and they can write people in. And she was saying that because it's sort of murky and muddled after Iowa, and, you know, people who are sort of the moderate Democrats are still trying to figure out what they're going to do, you might see a significant write-in for Bloomberg here, who you just mentioned. But I think the opposition research is going to keep coming out on him. And when you have a long history of making public statements, like our president, for example, some of those public statements were not the best ever.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on that side. You got into New Hampshire yesterday.
Yes,
you went to some different political events. Talk about some of the different, rallies and speeches that you went to, and kind of the atmosphere, I guess.
Yeah. The first one that I went to last night was Joe Biden, and I think I told you, and I tweeted this out. It was almost like being at a David Dewhurst rally when Dewhurst was either losing to Ted Cruz or losing to Dan Patrick. The sense of it is just not high energy. You know, I mean, if what is it? Trump likes to call him Sleepy Joe.
Yeah.
And that could have been said of some of his crowd last night as they were being, prompted for the chants, "We want Joe, we want Joe." There was a heckler who stood up in the crowd as I was there, and this heckler said, "Are you going to apologize for touching women and children?" And you may have seen the clip of this. Biden's wife, Jill Biden, actually was the one to sort of push the heckler out of the room.
Wow.
That part almost seems staged to me, but I'm not that conspiratorial, not today anyway. But it was just an interesting, situation. There they are on the eve of the election, and folks just don't seem that fired up about Joe. And of course, a part of that has to do with the fact that he did so poorly, in a lot of folks' estimation, in Iowa. You may have seen in the debate last Friday here in New Hampshire that Biden pretty much conceded he's not going to do that well here in New Hampshire. And, of course, his campaign has been banking on the idea that he'll do better with minorities. And so the next states that are coming up, the Nevada caucuses, where apparently they were still going to use that same app that they used in Iowa. Interestingly, I guess they're going to scrap that now. And also in South Carolina, Biden's campaign is saying that, wait for those because he still enjoys support among African Americans, in particular, minority communities, whereas these first two states are basically all white people. You hear that, Chad? But it really is true as you go around to some of these different events. I also went to see Pete Buttigieg, who's in his crowd. Buttigieg was larger than Biden's. I don't have the official head count for how many people were at each event. And one of the most controversial things you can do as a journalist is try to guess how many people were at a campaign rally or at a protest.
I'm horrible at predicting it. I'm horrible at it.
No matter what you do, people are going to criticize that. What I usually do, here's a reporting trick. I'll turn to a police officer who's there doing security, and I'll say, how many people do you think are here? And then I can say law enforcement on the scene estimates this is the number.
Yeah.
And so what I saw in doing that yesterday, there was probably 250, maybe 300 people at Biden's deal. There may have been 400 or 500 at Buttigieg's deal. It was a small high school gymnasium where Buttigieg was, and they didn't fill out the whole thing, but quite a few people there. Kevin Costner, Dances with Wolves, and Field of Dreams fame was, there at the Buttigieg event, saying that he didn't think he was necessarily going to, have his career take him to New Hampshire but Harry was talking, in favor of Mayor Pete. And it's a different feel at a Mayor Pete event. They are very fired up. The folks are sort of electric about Mayor Pete, which you and I have talked about this. It's sort of this dorky guy who's, really quick on his feet with his answers. He's somebody who inspires a lot of loyalty, though, from those who are in that crowd. And I was talking to someone who attended one of the very first Trump rallies in Texas. I'd have to check this. I think the first one he did in Texas as a candidate was at the AAC in Dallas. A reporter friend who was there said, I haven't seen such energy, and such excitement for a candidate. And my recollection was that, hey, I remember 2008, Barack Obama at the Toyota Center in Houston, and people were just coming out of their skin excited about this guy. And with Buttigieg, it's smaller crowds, or we're in smaller states here, but people are sort of in that same way, just really excited about Mayor Pete. I'm sort of fascinated by that.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting. And I don't know about the reporter friend, but you would think Bernie Sanders. That's who on the show I've said if there's anyone who has that type of zeal among supporters, it's Bernie, right? I mean that's how it is seen. Sure. But that is surprising to me that people are that fervent about Pete.
Yeah, they're fervent, but I don't know that they have the numbers. And with Sanders, it's a lock. I think. We don't make predictions here, but with Sanders, I mean, and these states are so small. One of the things I was thinking about, Chad, is that in Texas, because Texas is so big, we're really unaffected. Our politics are affected by national politics, but we're not affected by the neighboring states as much. We don't think about what goes on in New Mexico or Louisiana when we're making decisions about who we're going to vote for in Texas. It's just not the case. But in these places, the states are so small that they are also seeing what's going on in the media markets in the neighboring states. So, for example, Bloomberg is running lots of ads in Vermont. I think he's running a lot of ads in Massachusetts. And those states that are right there, people are hearing the radio. They're seeing the television ads and all of that. And so that's why you might see a significant number of people write in Mike Bloomberg here in New Hampshire if they still haven't made up their mind, and they're the kind of voter who is more in the middle and not so far over to the left with the Bernie Sanders supporters. It'll be interesting to see if there is a significant write-in for Bloomberg here. That might tell us something about what Bloomberg may do and what his performance might be in states where he's actually on the ballot. He's not on the ballot here.
Scott, we're running out of time. It's a shorter segment than what we usually have. Tell folks that they can find a quorum report.
We'll be tracking all of this, and we do have a really interesting rundown. Our friend Bonnie Bruce, she posted a longtime Capitol observer who went through the specific numbers and campaign finance reports about the disjointed efforts to try to keep the Texas House in Republican hands. Sort of a fascinating look at just how divided the Republican caucus is in the Texas House. It's right there at quorumreport.com. You can always sign up for our free email alerts at quorumreport.com. Thank you, Chad.
All right, Scott, enjoy a cigar or two in New Hampshire, and we'll talk to you next week.
It's going to happen. Talk soon.
All right, that's Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report.